Hi, I'm Jeremy Casey, UK-based business owner. It was in the second lockdown during the pandemic where I said to myself I was going to learn a new skill. Could have been learning some new recipes, learning a foreign language. But then a chance meeting occurred on when you're able to go for a walk with one person at a time, and I discovered a technology called Bitcoin, which many people will have heard of, but very few understand. And over the last couple of years, I've been spending time outside of my business educating individuals and businesses as to how important I and many others believe this technology actually is. Now, most people, like me, I'm not a technical person, I'm not a technical savvy person. And when I heard the term Bitcoin many years ago, I thought it was something just for computer scientists at best and potentially criminals and general unsavory characters at worst. How wrong I was. So the purpose of this video, and again, this isn't financial advice in any way, is I've put together a group of 6 UK-based professionals who, much like me, feel that business owners, chief financial officers and individuals need to start understanding this technology for what it is. Unfortunately, a lot of the mainstream media and things you read about and hear about Bitcoin is pretty much incorrect. But Bitcoin is a technology. How could it work for a business? How could a business benefit? How could an individual benefit? And I think there's 3 key areas here. One is as a treasury asset. If you're a business owner who is sitting on cash reserves, can Bitcoin take some of those cash reserves as a long-term asset? Because after all, in the last decade, there is no other financial asset that has outperformed Bitcoin. The second is the ever-growing payments technology. Many businesses around the world, and actually in the UK, are now starting to accept Bitcoin as payments, which is actually bringing them customers across the country, and if they have a product that is international of nature, actually bringing that product to service to a worldwide audience. And the third area is something I've done myself, where 65% of my staff actually allocate a portion of their monthly salary to Bitcoin every single month, which has been really fantastic for them in terms of the paper profits that they've generated so far, and it's far outperformed their company pension scheme. It's probably right at this point to mention a group recently formed called the Bitcoin Policy Institute. Of the 6 people talking today, many of them are part of the Bitcoin Policy Institute, which is a UK organisation which is now dealing with policymakers and at government level in terms of educating and trying to get the UK to benefit and put themselves in a position of strength with this technology, as we believe it can create jobs, drive innovation, as well as tapping and monetising into certain energy resources. I hope you enjoy the video.
Hi, my name is Dan Tubb. I've spent my life working in asset management and venture capital, and I'm here to tell you why I think that Bitcoin is so interesting to look at. You see, the essential problem is this: the Western world is in a debt crisis. A lot of this stems back to the 1970s, when the baby boomers, a very large generation, entered a very small working world. And throughout their lives, of course, they wanted to be generous towards their elders and those who are perhaps less fortunate. They did so by significantly expanding a number of social programs, healthcare, pensions and welfare. And a large generation being generous towards a small proportion of people is very affordable, perhaps very laudable. But demographics don't stop marching on, and this very large generation is now on the verge of retirement, and it is potentially going to bankrupt most Western governments. Look at the UK. The government is spending £1.30 for every £1 that it raises in revenues. The rest of it is borrowed. In fact, the debt has got so large now that it's the same size as the economy. Why does that matter? Well, very simply, at least, it makes it easy to explain. If the debt is the same size as the economy, it comes down to a simple question of which of them is growing faster. The debt's growing at about 4 or 5% a year, and that's just the coupon on the debt. That's the interest payments that need to be made. That's not accounting for any fresh debt that is being heaped on top, and that is happening all the time. The economy is not growing at 4 or 5% a year. There's very little prospect of that happening. So the hard truth is this: we're in a debt spiral. Consider the effect that it has on public finances. The British government spends about 211 billion every year on the NHS. Pensions is next at 178 billion. Welfare is 142 billion. After that, it's dead interest at 120 billion a year. And actually, those numbers that I've just given you, that's not departmental spend. There's a lot of non-cash items in there. So actually, in terms of raw spending, dead interest is the second highest cost that the government has today, and it's soon going to overtake the NHS to become the largest item of expenditure. So, how does government square this seemingly impossible circle? It does it by printing money. Now, if you cast your mind back 10, 20, if you can, 30 or 40 years, what did a meal out cost? What was the cost of pretty much anything? You notice when you look back over those sort of time scales just how significantly money has lost its value. But we're at the point now where the rate of money printing, in order to continue to make the sums add up, is increasing to the point where you're noticing the price increases happen from year to year. So it's not surprising that a lot of people are looking for a modern form of money that cannot be inflated away, and they're turning to Bitcoin. Now, there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. Each of those is divisible into 100 million places. That's what makes it so functional. But consider this. There are only 50 million millionaires in the world. So if every millionaire in the world wanted to have one Bitcoin, they couldn't have one. It is that rare. Now, as we saw recently with the US banking crisis, a crisis which I very much believe is not over yet, the point is, the system is not as robust as we are encouraged to believe. What happens when a large amount of money wants to exit the banking system to something that can't be printed away, can't be seized or otherwise impeded? Well, even without the store of value argument, let's say you need a little bit more evidence on that, fine. Irrespective of that, Bitcoin has significant use cases today. It is used all the time to send very large transactions around the world. You can convert money into Bitcoin, send it across the world in a few minutes, and then transfer it out into whatever local currency. And in doing so, you bypass the slow and very expensive traditional banking system. That happens every day at the moment. So irrespective of the store value, its utility is not in question. And let me just leave you with one final thought. In 1997, 300 million people were using the internet. It was the fastest growing technology in all of human history. And within a decade, it had changed the world. Well, Bitcoin is growing at twice the speed of the internet and has today the same number of users as the internet did in 1997. But because of its higher growth rate, it's on track to hit 1 billion users by the end of 2026. This is a technology that you are going to need to know about.
Hello everyone, my name is David Parkinson. My background is in telecommunications at BT, management consulting at Ernst & Young and PwC, and more recently, broadcast media and video streaming platforms. In parallel to this, I spend a lot of time educating finance and legal professionals on Bitcoin, what it is, and why it matters. As we've just heard, there is a very real and challenging economic backdrop that sets the stage for Bitcoin to flourish. So let's explore it in more detail. What is Bitcoin? At its most simplistic, Bitcoin is a database. A layer deeper, it's a software protocol that enables the transfer of value over a communications channel. Still, and it can be described as a digital currency in which encryption techniques are used to regulate the generation of units of currency and verify the transfer of funds, operating independently of a centralized authority. Ultimately, Bitcoin is most easily thought of as native money for the internet. In the traditional world of money and finance, the role of money is defined by the centralized issuer. Typically, the central bank and the national government confers the legal status of this currency for use in all relevant territories. With this model in place, there is a series of relationships between the central bank, commercial banks, retail banks, technology companies, individuals, and countless other third parties, all of whom play a role in making each transaction happen, often taking multiple days to achieve settlement finality. Bitcoin removes almost all of this friction and enables a direct transfer of value to take place between two parties, instantly and with final settlement globally. So when you hear about Bitcoin, it's important to differentiate it from other technological innovations such as email or social networks like Facebook and Instagram. It's more accurate to think of Bitcoin in a similar framework as electricity or the base layer of the internet itself. In the UK, Bitcoin is subject to capital gains tax, and whilst it remains unregulated, it more accurately fits into the bucket of property or a commodity. A nice way to conceptualize Bitcoin is a digital form of gold, or gold 2.0. That isn't an entirely accurate description, but some might find it helpful in the sense that Bitcoin is finite, it has a cost of extraction that is very high through a process called mining, and once you have Bitcoin, you can truly verify that it's the real Bitcoin that can be used for a transactional purpose. A key difference between gold and Bitcoin is that you can allocate enormous amounts of mining resources and machinery to create and find more gold. But the same is not true with Bitcoin. No matter how much computing power you use, it will still take a further 120 years to create the final 2 million Bitcoin. Bitcoin really does have the potential to usher in a new era of borderless, decentralized, unstoppable, uncensorable currency that will permeate every jurisdiction globally to maintain frictionless trade and transfer of capital, and it works in an apolitical manner. It does not discriminate and works the same for everybody. The price is fascinating to most, and initially, the volatility of price is typically the thing that brings new market participants in search of some quick trading profit, but that is the least important thing about Bitcoin. When you start exploring Bitcoin in detail, it begs many different questions about the role and function of money and what the key properties are. Whilst these notions are not in scope for this discussion, they do open fundamental questions about the differences between commodity money, free market private currencies, and government-backed state-issued currency, each with various pros and cons. The key thing to know about Bitcoin is the following. The white paper was written in October 2008, and Bitcoin went live in January 2009. There are a maximum of 21 million, and currently around 19 million have been mined. It's estimated that it will take until the year 2140 to mine the last Bitcoin. Around 4 to 6 million have been permanently lost and cannot be retrieved. Every 4 years, there is a block reward halving whereby the number of Bitcoin produced every 10 minutes is halved. This continues until the last Bitcoin is mined, and the next halving is due to take place around April 2024. It's fully decentralized. No one owns it, and the network is secured and transactions confirmed by those running the software through their machines. It creates full transaction traceability. You can trace any transaction back to the wallets the assets were sent from and to on any transaction. Furthermore, you can also see how many coins are in each wallet. It's a common misconception with Bitcoin to assume it can be used for criminal activity. If you're a criminal, then it's much easier to hide your transactions using the US dollar or other fiat currencies than it is to use Bitcoin. And the current total market size of Bitcoin is around about $600 billion. This assumes a price per Bitcoin of around about $30,000. This graphic outlines more clearly the nature of the scarcity and new Bitcoin production. Every 4 years, the number of Bitcoin produced every 10 minutes reduces by half. And this continues until around the year 2140, when all the Bitcoin will have been mined. As a reminder, there are roughly 19 million in circulation today, and you can see how that distribution curve gets increasingly flatter over time. It's worth noting that the annual production of gold is somewhere around 2% new supply creation annually, and in 2024 at the next halving, Bitcoin annual production release is likely to dip below that of gold, which in turn makes it more scarce. We won't go into the full detail and technical design of Bitcoin on this session, but there is a very elegant series of rules within the protocol which ensure it works and does exactly what it's supposed to. We've already touched on the supply issuance and the mining creation component, but this is supported by a reward and incentive model that ensures individuals are sufficiently motivated to contribute their computing power to the network. Within that construct, there is the transaction processing capability the decentralized, verifiable public transaction ledger to capture all the information, the security and cryptography to ensure transactions remain final, and one of the most crucial components, the difficulty adjustment. I mentioned earlier that Bitcoin can be thought of as gold 2.0. Well, the difficulty adjustment means that as you allocate more power and computing equipment onto the network, that the ability to produce more is not accelerated. That is to say, more equipment equals more security, rather than faster extraction of Bitcoin as the network adjusts to make it more difficult to release the Bitcoin the more equipment there is. And that's akin to saying that the Earth's crust can detect when people are mining the land for gold, and in response pushes the gold deposit deeper into the crust to make it harder for people to extract. The cashless world is already here, and it's estimated that between 92 and 95% of global transactions are already digital. We have the notion of central bank digital currencies on the horizon too, and Bitcoin represents a free market-driven commodity money for individuals, businesses and others to use, instead of the centrally issued bank currencies that are starting to emerge. The path to greater adoption of Bitcoin depends on the dissemination of education and products and services that make accessing, using, storing and accepting Bitcoin very simple. And as that increase continues, we will likely see Bitcoin progress from becoming a collectible to a store of value with less volatility, a medium of exchange for transactions, and eventually a unit of account in which all goods and services are priced, as we see in El Salvador today, with other nations reviewing similar moves to recognize Bitcoin as legal tender in their country over the coming years. Increasingly, corporations are starting to realize that rather than seeing their cash held on balance sheets eaten away by inflation, that they can allocate this into Bitcoin for the long term. MicroStrategy were the first to undertake this in the year 2020 and now hold over 140,000 Bitcoin at a market value of over $4 billion. The story is similar with Tesla, Square and accounting giant KPMG in Canada, who announced in 2022 that they've done the same. Fidelity also released a report titled "Why Investors Need to Consider Bitcoin Separately from Other Digital Assets." So whilst we may still be early in the life of Bitcoin, the importance of it as a new asset class both to store on your balance sheet and to accept as a payment mechanism should not be underestimated.
I'm Helen Gray, and I'm the owner of a small business. I run the Green Lodge Aviemore, which is a 5-star holiday cottage in the Highlands of Scotland. It's been going for about 5 years and has an annual turnover of £75,000. All of my bills and my expenses are, as you would imagine, in pounds sterling, and to date all of my customers have paid me in pounds sterling too. However, this year, 2023, I will also be accepting payment in Bitcoin. And this is for two main reasons. Firstly, I want to capture some of this new market. There is a growing and often very affluent group of new customers who want to pay for things in Bitcoin, and I want them as my customers. And two, I want to increase the amount of Bitcoin that I own, and frankly, accepting payment for products or services is the easiest way of accomplishing that. I was actually surprised at how frictionless it was to do this, to start accepting payment in Bitcoin. So for example, Coin Corner, which is a long established exchange on the Isle of Man, they offer a payment gateway that you just plug in to your existing online storefront, and there, like that, you can accept payment in either Bitcoin or pound sterling with, if you accept payment in Bitcoin, the amount pegged at the verified exchange rate of Bitcoin to pound sterling for accounting purposes. It's really a lot easier than I thought it was going to be.
In today's digital age, securing digital currencies from potential hackers is of the utmost importance. One such currency that requires stringent security measures is Bitcoin. This is done by using a lot of computing power and energy to create a digital barrier, and this is called Bitcoin mining. Despite the energy-intensive nature of mining, many professional miners use clean and renewable energy to make it more efficient and reduce costs. Around 60% of Bitcoin is currently mined using renewable energy sources, and the amount of energy used by Bitcoin mining is only a small fraction of the world's energy consumption. This is much less than other industries like finance or gold mining. To secure the Bitcoin network, proof of work is used. This is the best way to ensure security. Proof of stake is often thought of as an alternative, however this method gives more control to people with more money, which is not good for security or decentralisation. It's important to note that if Bitcoin were to switch to proof of stake, it would use more energy and contribute to more greenhouse gases entering the atmosphere, which is not good for the environment. In terms of value, Bitcoin has many benefits. It can be sent anywhere in the world quickly and cheaply, making it an attractive option for businesses. Bitcoin is environmentally friendly because it can convert potent greenhouse gases into work, which helps to secure the network and reduce CO2 emissions. This presents an opportunity for businesses to achieve their carbon and ESG goals by harnessing the technology of Bitcoin mining. By using this technology, we can prevent the release of carbon and methane into the atmosphere and turn wasted energy into profitable ventures. This economic value can be reinvested into infrastructure and renewable energy, positioning us as a global leader in this field and driving its future development. Therefore, Bitcoin not only benefits the economy, but also benefits the environment.
For those that understand it, Bitcoin has a powerful narrative. Individuals on the ground trying to make their way in the world, confronted by rising prices, without a matching wage increase, desire a source of money that cannot be devalued and confiscated. As such, Bitcoin is a compelling promise. My name is Victoria Collette Jones, and I authored the book Truth Decay: How Bitcoin Fixes This, and I have a website called Satoshi's Page designed to educate others about Bitcoin. For 20 years I worked as a dentist. During that time I grappled with the differences and challenges of operating a healthcare service within different systems, the NHS and the private sector. These systems differ fundamentally in how they pay for their resources, and this experience taught me the power of systems and incentive structures and the different outcomes that occur. While well funded and functioning for those that work within the system, there was no reason to change. However, as cost-cutting and burdensome regulation increased, many clamoured for improvement. A mass exodus of dentists from the NHS and some from the overall profession has resulted. Hardly anyone understands why there are insufficient NHS dentists or why the overall healthcare system continues to struggle in the UK today. Likewise, only a few in the financial world understand why savvy members of the general public are exiting the existing financial system by buying Bitcoin, and consequently why the price of Bitcoin is taking off like a rocket. The NHS rewards quantity and availability at the lowest possible cost, whereas the private sector mostly incentivises high quality and a good reputation. Our current monetary system operates similarly. Keynesian economics rewards the availability of money at low interest rates. On the other hand, the Austrian economists champion a gold standard, arguing for the highest quality of money with an excellent reputation to facilitate trade. The UK lost its empire when it participated in World War I, and the pound initially divorced from the gold standard. Since then, efforts to manage our money are leading us towards tragic consequences. Debt accumulation has stolen value from that generation's grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The promise of Keynesian economics was of a better world with managed money, but instead the money gravitates to the top of the food chain, invisibly, protected by governments and dysfunctional laws. With Bitcoin, money no longer relies on management by governments and central banks. People can move their wealth into their own custody without relying on a bank. They can cross an international border unchallenged by remembering 24 words in their head. Whilst gold was heavy and relied on banks providing the receipt for currency to circulate in the economy, Bitcoin eliminates that and allows people to transact in a way that will enable them to preserve their purchasing power. The middle class was robust and healthy when the financial system operated on a gold standard and the country was prosperous. When people can protect their property rights through the soundness of their money, commerce thrives and society functions well. By facilitating this, the business of all countries can operate more optimally. History and the lesson of failed states and fallen empires dictates that mismanagement of money leads to hyperinflation. Countries that fall into hyperinflation through loss of control of their currency experience social unrest, chaos, and a fall in the quality of life for the general public. Many economists have done their best with our current financial system to stave this off. If they should fail, however, history shows that hyperinflations tend to lead to revolutions and dysfunctional leaders. By allowing people to transact with a digital form of sound money, we can prevent that tragic outcome, and the general population can look forward to a prosperous future once again.
Hi, my name is Richard Medley. I'm part of the team at Chancery Court Tax Chambers, based in London. I've been asked to provide a little commentary on why it's my personal belief that the Bitcoin network, along with its native asset BTC, is among the most important discoveries in human history. As you've seen from the other previous contributors in this series, there are a number of perspectives to view Bitcoin from. All of them valid, all of them hold merit when viewed in isolation. And when taken together, it's easy to understand why Bitcoiners are so passionate in their advocacy of the network. I've been asked as part of the tax family to make a short video setting out why businesses and their accounting teams should take Bitcoin seriously. I don't intend to spend a lot of time in this piece explaining the tax treatment of a business or an individual using Bitcoin the asset, as there are many how-to guides and specialist software that can help determine the correct accounting methods. I intend instead to deal a bit more with the why, as well as taking into consideration all of the valid points of those who preceded me. It's helpful to think about Bitcoin in two parts. Firstly, Bitcoin the network. Bitcoin the network is the first innovation in accounting in 600 years. Since the advent of double entry accounting, humans used to make do with single entry accounting. A farmer would go to market, they'd buy 5 sheep. They'd come home, they'd write 5 sheep on a clay tablet and bake it in the sun. It's largely to ensure that it couldn't be tampered with. In the 1400s, double entry accounting was adopted. This is the same system that we use today, which we can think of as, I bought 5 sheep, I paid £5. Without a ledger, it's impossible for a society to function. Today we have an analogue ledger, which is possible to manipulate. We have seen how trusting individuals to control their ledger can have negative consequences, as usually there is some participant who decides to cheat. There's barely an industry on the planet that hasn't seen devastating fraud that, when exposed, provokes inquests as to how did this happen? How did it get past the checks and balances? We could look at the likes of Enron, Bernie Madoff, and the recent FTX fraud to get a clear picture of how many people can be hurt when a ledger is manipulated by a bad actor. Why do instances like this take so long to come to light? Largely because those ledgers are private. The Bitcoin network is the first immutable ledger in human history. It self-audits every 10 minutes and ensures that nobody can cheat. It can be helpful to think of a transaction on a Bitcoin network as having gone through an incorruptible triple entry accounting system. A consensus mechanism ensures that a transaction between two parties is valid and is then added into the next block for the rest of time. The rules of the road are the same for an individual, a business, a charity, a nation state. Bitcoin does not allow cheating. Secondly, we can discuss Bitcoin, lowercase b, the asset. It's the best money in the world, amongst other reasons because it runs on the best ledger in the world. Bitcoin, the asset, is an incorruptible, unconfiscatable, digitally native bearer asset. It can be accessed from anywhere in the world with an internet connection. If your internet connection goes down, rest assured that your Bitcoin will still be there when you re-establish signal. From a tax planning point of view, Bitcoin is geographically agnostic and does not degrade with time. Bitcoin does not know where you are, nor does it care. The Bitcoin network will never close your account, will never refuse to transfer your value to someone else, and will never prevent you from accessing your funds. Even if you think that Bitcoin becoming a world reserve asset is a long way into the future, it's worth considering that it can play an important part in planning your affairs, even if you live in a historically stable and financialised society. A point I make often is that up until last year, a portfolio of buy-to-let flats in Kiev may have been attractive to an individual. I'm sure that those Ukrainian families who fled the war carrying their lives on their back, there weren't many who were hopeful of sneaking this family silver past the border guard. Among the people who crossed into Poland, some crossed carrying their Bitcoin security phrase in their head. Their Bitcoin was just as acceptable in Poland as it was in Kiev. In summary, although it may feel like you don't need Bitcoin right now, and you may not need the Bitcoin network right now, millions of people choose it every day, and that number is growing.
I hope you enjoyed those 6 little sections from the guys, and thank you for putting the effort into doing this. I think the next section is, well, what next? Again, there's a huge amount of information out there, and certainly people like myself are very willing to help people get educated and up to speed on this important technology. So on the screen, you're more than welcome to reach out via email. My email will come up on the screen. And also, as well as that, you may have been sent this by your accountant, who we're working with some accountancy practices, and reach out to them because, whilst we're happy holding remote calls, there's an ever increasing number of regional seminars and events and exhibitions on what we believe is a very important subject. Thanks very much.